Okay, so we are so excited to have some folks from Calm Waters here today. Calm Waters provides services for families impacted by grief and loss from death and divorce. And their presentation will provide an overview of Calm Waters services as well as information about grief and grief theories. Calm Waters hosts several MSW and BSW interns and provides a wealth of educational opportunities for these interns, while also working to provide excellent care for the community. The presenters include current MSW and BSW program interns, as well as the agency's program director and intern supervisor. So maybe you guys can all introduce yourselves and then take it away.
Yes, thank you, Casey. I believe Becca is frozen and she is the one managing our PowerPoint, so it's possible that Shelby will need to share her screen. But I'll go ahead and start the introduction and kind of work our way through the first few slides that we have, just since time is of the essence. We will save our questions for the end of the presentation, so if you all have them, feel free to drop them in the chat or just hold them and then we'll create the space to talk about those at the end. So like Casey mentioned, we have all of our half of our program interns, and then I myself am the program director at Calm Waters. My name's Hannah Showalter, and I'm a licensed master's level social worker. And then I will pass it over to Shelby, who is sharing her screen. Thank you, Shelby, to introduce herself when she's ready.
Hey guys. So as Hannah said, my name is Shelby. I am an MSW concentration year level intern at Calm Waters, and I am trying to get this to full screen so everyone can see it. Sorry, technical difficulties. Okay, can everyone see that okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Alrighty. So yep, that is me. I will let Sydney go ahead and go. I don't know that Becca is ready yet.
Okay. Hi guys, my name is Sydney Flynn. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I'm using a little bit different speaker system. I am a BSW student in my senior year, and this is my second semester of practicum at Calm Waters. And I guess when Rebecca is ready and able, she will introduce herself.
Yeah, and I'll briefly introduce Becca, and then we can have her reintroduce herself. So she's also an MSW student in her concentration year, and she's at Calm Waters as well. So we will move on to the mission. So like Casey mentioned, our mission at Calm Waters is to help children and families in their grief journey caused by death, divorce, and other significant loss. We recognize there are many, many types of grief, and some of our services go into a little bit more detail about which griefs they serve. Like we serve incarceration, adoption, foster care, deportation, deployment, and other forms of grief, anticipatory loss, and things like that. But in our mission, we kind of encompass all those by saying other significant loss, death, and divorce. So a little bit about the history of Calm Waters. We were founded in 1992 by a 9-year-old boy named Jason. He saw the Dougie Center, which is located in Oregon, a grief center located in Oregon, after his dad died. And he told his mom, you know what, I want to find a place like I want to find a place like the Dougie Center in Oklahoma. Well, that didn't exist. His mom called, I think she said, over 200 different agencies. And her final call was to Charlotte Lankard, a wonderful therapist in the Oklahoma City area, who said, you know, that doesn't exist, but we are going to create it. So in 1992, they founded Calm Waters in the basement of Integris Baptist Hospital, and Jason named Calm Waters after the time that he sailed with his dad. It was in the Calm Waters that he felt safest, and so he decided that Calm Waters was the perfect name. Jason is still very much involved with this, as well as his mother, Sandra. She is still one of our very active and current volunteers, and we just dearly love that family and Charlotte Lankard for their drive and passion to create something in Oklahoma that is still helping and serving so many people. Since our opening, we have served over 50,000 individuals. That includes adults and children. Calm Waters has also provided services through a lot of major impacts in the Oklahoma City history, 1995 Murrah bombing, the May 2013 tornado, and the May 1999 tornadoes, but that is just scraping the surface of the way that we have stepped into the community and educating about grief and loss and supporting those going through it. So these are some of the services that we offer. We offer grief support groups, divorce support groups. We'll go into all of these in more detail, but just to see a broad overview and talk a little bit about what the practicum experience feels like for our students, I think it's important to see all the different areas that students have the ability to be involved in. So we encourage them to do group work, obviously working with families, individuals, especially children. And we also have started a new program, partnership program, where we work with other nonprofits, and also the Oklahoma City Detention Center, where we go into their nonprofits and provide groups for their population. So those individuals are not having to go to Calm Waters specifically, but they're being served in the agency that they already know and are already comfortable with. We do provide counseling and consultations, so that's one-on-one services. We do co-parenting seminars. Those are 4-hour court mandated seminars. And that's training for individuals going through a divorce in Oklahoma. We do community crisis service. And then one of my favorite things to talk about, just Camp Courage. With this, I think it's important to discuss what our interns are encouraged to do when they onboard with Calm Waters. I always tell them, there are a lot of different opportunities, and I think it's helpful in the learning contract process to really establish what their passion are, what their strengths are. If the student loves working with children, if the student loves grant writing, if the student is really passionate about working with a specific population or a specific type of group, whether it be those justice impacted, or we also have an LGBTQ plus group, then I want to get them engaged and create their learning contract around their passion to help develop those skills, also get them further connected with other agencies, and get practice with that actual, population and that community. So not only do we, really think through the learning contract process, but the tasks that I assign and I empower them to get engaged with align with some of those goals that they put in their learning contract. And I think that's a really helpful thing for our students. We also do group supervision. We do group supervision with all of our LMSWs, BSW students for about 30 minutes. Right now we're doing a book study, which has been really wonderful. And then we also do individual supervision half the time. Part of that is helpful for me as a supervisor. When I take on a lot of students, it's hard to meet with them for an hour, but then also that helps them stay connected. I know another presentation mentioned the importance of creating these connections while you're in school. And I myself, as a social worker, have found that as one of the most helpful things I walked away from my education with. And so I love having them not only get connected with each other, but then we also have some clinical interns that they also get connected with that are LPCs or LMFTs. And then we also are moving forward doing a multidisciplinary case review with our clinical staff and program staff. So you, again, get that kind of well-rounded. LPCs come with different strengths that LMFWs come with, LMFTs come with. And so we want to empower our LMSWs or MSWs to get connected with those other individuals. So like I mentioned before, one of our newest programs and most exciting programs to me, because it is new, is our Incarcerated Oklahoma's Grief Support Group. So partnering with Oklahoma Detention Center, we have trained 3 facilitators that are going in to lead grief support groups for those who are detained and justice impacted. And we're working with another wonderful organization called Teams. They're located in Oklahoma City, and they primarily specialize in working with those who are justice impacted or have substance abuse histories or in substance abuse recovery. So we're working with their peer support facilitators who are, like I said, justice impacted, so that when they're leading the groups, they understand what it's like to have gone through the legal system, to be involved in the detention center, and are able to provide coping skills and support because they've been there with a little bit more credibility and build that rapport quicker. We offer a specialized curriculum that is continuing to develop as we work in the system more and understand their needs. And then this is, again, a very exciting program because it's new. There's a lot of future growth opportunities that we're looking at grants. We're looking at new partnership connections or how we can increase our impact within the jail working with the resources that we have. So as I mentioned, Camp Courage is one of my favorite things to talk about. This is our 3-day art camp that we do in the summertime. It'll be in June this year. It is in connection with our other artists in the community who are able to come and teach kids their art skills while talking about their grief story and how those two have aligned to help them navigate their loss. We know we can't fix grief. We can't take someone's grief away, but we can teach them the skills to manage the emotions as they come. And we know art is a huge piece of that. So this is also a big fan favorite for all of our volunteers, interns, and staff, because we get to learn a lot of really wonderful art things as well, such as ceramics, crocheting. Crocheting was a big fan favorite last year, which kind of surprised me. We did moss art. We had a lot of different paint skills, yoga, movement, dance, music, really any type of art. We encourage those artists to volunteer with us, connect with us to teach kids their art skills. We also have opportunities for junior camp counselors. The children age range is 6 to 14, and this is for kids who've experienced all types of significant loss. So not only the death of a loved one, but if their parents have gone through a divorce, if their parent has been deported, deployed, if their parent's been incarcerated, or if they've ever gone through foster care and adoption, they would be able to sign up for camp. We do have a small cost associated with it, but there are scholarships, and we really don't turn anyone away from our scholarships. And then each camp session or each art session has a curriculum that goes along with it. So it guides the child and the volunteers to be able to talk about grief and talk about how art connects us with our story. You don't necessarily have to tell your story, but you can paint your story. You can play music that connects with your story, things like that. Our community crisis service is where we staff and our concentration year interns go out into the community to provide a crisis response. So psychological first aid, but mainly just connecting them with common grief reactions, letting them know what additional resources are out there, and creating the culture of a grief sensitive environment at a workplace or a school. Some of the times that we have gone out in the past is if a staff member has died by suicide, if there's been a homicide within the workplace, if there's been an anticipatory loss happening. So maybe someone's diagnosed with a terminal illness and that staff is trying to figure out how to respond, how do we talk about this, how do we honor their health plan or their personal wishes, and how do we, as a workplace, become sensitive to that if they're not familiar or in the mental health field, or maybe if they are. So this is a really wonderful way for our concentration year students to kind of get that experience working with crisis services in partnership with our trained mental health professionals.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about school groups. I love school groups. School groups are one of my favorite things that we do. It really just warms my heart, and it's something that I wish I could do for the rest of my life. But alas, I am graduating, so I will have to continue on. So our school groups are offered in over 150 public schools across Oklahoma. And so that's within the Oklahoma City metro area. We have people in Norman and just all around Oklahoma. We support kids. Our school groups are for kids who are pre-K to 12th grade who've experienced a loss. And this is more of our significant loss. So these could be kids who have gone through divorce, who their parents have been deployed, incarcerated, deported, if they've lost a loved one, all those different kinds of loss we see. And we also split these kids up into age groups. So we're not having pre-Kers with 5th graders, and we separate our curriculum by those ages as well. So that way we can provide education that's appropriate for the age group. So right now what we have is pre-K to 2nd grade, 3rd to 5th, and then middle school, which is 6th to 8th grade, I believe. And then our high school is 9th to 12th. And one of the things that I'm currently working on is separating our pre-K and 2nd grade groups. So that way we can have a little bit more advanced things for the 2nd graders and still keep our pre-Kers at a level that is necessary for their development. Our curriculum is 9 weeks. So we come into the schools once a week for 9 weeks. If they have field trips, we won't go. But we're there every week talking about grief, making a space for grief, allowing them to just talk about their emotions and really find a community within their school of other people who have gone through these same things. So we talk about managing your emotions during school, and we give them coping skills. So at the end of every group, we call it closing circle, and we give them coping skills so they can calm their bodies down after talking about really difficult emotions and go back to class, because going back to class is something that's very difficult. We also work with our counselors to make sure that this is like the best time, so that we make sure kids aren't missing lunch, they aren't missing recess, like important parts of their day, to come talk about their grief. Um,
All right. A large part of what we also do are our support groups, specifically our center-based support groups. So this is, these are totally free services that we have for children, adults, and families on their grief journey. We've got groups starting for kiddos at 3 years old all the way up through the lifespan. Adult groups are split by type of loss. And so our adult groups, we've got a group for those who've had parent, sibling, or another significant relationship loss, those who've had a spouse or partner loss, suicide loss, child loss, and then a pregnancy, infant, and infertility loss. And then we also have an anticipatory loss group that happens virtually. And so we've got virtual adult groups each night as well. One thing we've recently done, so we're constantly getting feedback from group participants, and figuring out ways to best serve our participants. And so one change we recently made is with our child loss group. That group was always full, always at capacity. To create some more space and create kind of a more individualized, specific group, we've split that to have child loss for those who lost a child under the age 18 and those who've lost a child above the age 18. And so that's allowed us to serve more clients, and for them to be with other individuals, other families that have had kind of a similar loss, because there are differences with that, losing a child, a young child versus an adult child. We also are always kind of hoping to expand what we can offer as we have the resources. So one of our goals is to hopefully have a homicide loss group that will be able to start. We're hopefully looking at doing that in the fall. We've just noticed that's another need. There are different dynamics that come with homicide loss than come with loss from an illness or an accident or from suicide. And so we're trying to expand that group. And then another one that we have kind of on our radar, hoping to do as we have kind of space and resources, is an overdose loss group. Our groups are right now, they are every other week. And so our grief support groups happen on Monday nights. We also have divorce support groups because there is grief and divorce. And so those divorce support groups happen every other Thursday night. At this time, another kind of hopeful expansion that we would have is to be able to provide Spanish speaking groups, especially for our adults. That's another one that we're trying to find the resources to be able to translate our curriculum and then find a facilitator who is able to provide that service. Along with our groups, we also have our counseling and consultation services. So our counseling services are for individuals, children, and families who are experiencing grief from death, anticipated death, pregnancy loss, infertility, or divorce. So with someone who's wanting to get counseling services from us, we do what we call an initial service consultation, which is our model of doing an intake, an initial intake and screening. And we meet with the family just to ensure that both for them and for us, we're the right fit, that their needs are within the scope of services that we provide, that we have the availability and insurance and all of those details that you talk through kind of in an intake. And in that initial service consultation, we provide information about our counseling services, information about our support groups, and then we also have consultation services that we can provide after that initial service consultation as well. A consultation service is different than counseling. It's 1 to 3 sessions. That's very providing very like concrete information. So those consultation services are often providing psychoeducation. Maybe a family comes in and they're not sure how to tell their child that someone died, or they're not sure how to tell their child that they're getting a divorce, or how to talk about how a person died. And so these 1 to 3 sessions allow us to meet with someone and provide that psychoeducation for a specific question or issue the family comes in with. And then after those consultation sessions, if they feel like they're needing therapy, we can provide the referral at that point. We also, this is kind of a newer service that we're still kind of figuring out exactly how we offer it, is a crisis consultation format. And what we're doing there is a lot of times in very early grief. So right after the death of a loved one, families might have a lot of just questions and need some very immediate support. And the needs are kind of different with someone who had a loved one die 2 days ago versus 3 months ago, and the emotions being felt are very different. So we're looking right now of how we can best serve those families in early grief, and how we can do care for them. We also have a co-parenting seminar. I want to make sure we've got time for all of our slides, so I'm going to kind of start to move quickly. And I think we might have just lost our slideshow. So let me see if I can start sharing.
I can see it, Becca.
Oh, you can see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, no, now it's gone.
Okay. I was like, I thought, yeah. Let me share. Can you all see the slideshow on mine? I
Yeah.
need to make it larger. Sorry, just a second. Sorry for our technology issues today.
Would you like me to touch on this one, Becca, while you get that figured out?
Yes, please.
Okay, yeah, so our co-parenting seminars, this is our court mandated seminar that divorcing parents have to take with minor children. It meets the requirement of the court, but right now we have a concentration year student teaching this course, and she's doing an incredible job bringing in important factors in the co-parenting dynamics, validating the relationship, talking about guilt, regret, and shame, but then empowering them to embark on this new journey of co-parenting together. And then we also in the future are going to offer more resources for divorcing parents with special topics such as domestic violence, if maybe they're co-parenting with an individual who is out of state, or they're co-parenting with a child who has special needs. This is important because it reduces the level of conflict between parents as they embark in this new relationship. And we want to be there to support them with additional resources such as counseling and our support groups, which Becca's mentioned are free on Thursday evenings. Sydney, would you like to talk about the next thing?
Yes. Okay. So we have a couple of community events and partnerships. We have one coming up like pretty recently. Under the Big Top will be Friday, April 21st. Feel free to come if you want. It is for adults. There will be adult beverages, food, carnival games, and all of the money is going towards Calm Waters and helping our services stay the way that they need to and supporting us. There will also be raffles, there will be magicians. You can also volunteer if you want. And if you volunteer to help set up or run a game or take down, you can get in for free. And anybody can do this. So another event that we have is Ripples of Hope, and it's an annual breakfast fundraiser. So it's like an auction. We have a guest speaker who is typically someone who has been through a grief event and has been to Calm Waters, and they tell their grief story and tell how Calm Waters has helped them. And that is a beautiful way for us to get money. We also have partnership programs. So our partnership programs are just different programs that want to partner with us and want to do group services in their own place. And we train them and we give them curriculum to start groups in their own practice. So these are some of our partners that we have currently. We're always looking for new partners. So if you're in an agency and would like to partner with Calm Waters, feel free to contact us. Some other volunteer opportunities that we have are support group facilitator. You can volunteer to be a part of Camp Courage, and then all of our events that we've talked about previously. So our support group facilitators are typically past group participants and practicum students, or just other community members who are wanting to volunteer and help in the community. And I think I'm going to give it to Becca.
Yes, so now we're gonna go in some to grief theory, and talking about types of grief. So there are a lot of different types of grief. At Calm Waters, just because we can't do everything, we focus kind of on what we have seen the most need for. And we're always kind of, like I had said with our groups, we're always evaluating, are there other needs we're seeing in our community, in our clients? So right now, this is kind of a list. Those in bold: anticipatory grief, complicated grief, reproductive loss, traumatic grief, and ambiguous loss are some that we especially focus on with our services. But we recognize that all of these types of grief are very real and very impactful to individuals. So anticipatory grief occurs when a loved one is expecting a grief experience. This could be long-term illness, incarceration, deployment, divorce. I mean, with this, the grief begins prior to the event. A lot of times, a lot of the same grief symptoms are present prior to this event, including a lot of thinking, feeling, cultural, and social reactions. And we'll see later some common grief reactions. We also often will see complicated grief. So there are a lot of factors that can complicate someone's grief. This could be that they are marginalized in society. It could be due to legal involvement, history of depression or mental health issues, social isolation. It could be being in a family or community where they're discouraged from expressing their grief or don't have any opportunity to express that grief. It could also be related to concurrent stressors going on, or if there's a codependent or conflictual relationship with who they're grieving. Traumatic grief is another one that we see a lot. And so when someone experiences a trauma associated with their grief, they have to both then deal with the trauma and deal with the grief. Trauma and grief are separate, but if they get thrown together, then people often experience more intense symptoms because they're experiencing both that grief and that trauma all together. And then we also see a lot and discuss a lot ambiguous loss. So Pauline Moss, who's a therapist, coined that term ambiguous loss. And often with ambiguous loss, there's either a lack of finality, and it's often untreated or unrecognized or unacknowledged in society. So examples with ambiguous loss could be the loss and the changes in relationship that come with Alzheimer's disease or dementia, maybe with developmental disabilities, brain injury, mental health changes, addiction, national disaster, war, divorce, incarceration, the loss of biological parents after adoption. There are a lot of ways that ambiguous loss could present themselves with different populations. And I'm going to give it to Shelby.
Thank you. Alrighty, so in regards to the reality of grief, when we think about grief, we often think about the proposed 5 stages of grief, like denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. This is something that's been widely talked about for a while, but the 5 stages of grief were never really meant for the bereaved. That's just how they've been applied again and again over time. It's actually tended to surmise the sequential stages of various emotions that a patient may go through when they're diagnosed with a terminal illness. So a way of processing the reality of their own anticipated death and not that of a loved one. There are not exact stages that people really go through in the grief process. Stages also seem to imply that there is a set end to grief, which we know that there isn't. In reality, grief is kind of messy, like how is shown in this graphic. The highs and lows of the grieving process can feel like a roller coaster at times that you can't get off. There may be days when you feel positive and optimistic about your healing, only to sort of spiral back into more like sadness and depression within days or hours. These swings in your emotions are in fact part of the process of grief. For theories on grief used, one of the main theories that is used in the curriculum at Comwaters is Worden's 4 tasks of mourning. So psychologist J. William Worden provides a framework of 4 tasks that help us to understand how people journey through grief. So healing happens gradually as grievers address these tasks in no specific order, going back and forth from one another over time. So these tasks include, first, to accept the reality of the loss. So although you know intellectually that the person has died, you may experience a sense of disbelief almost. So integrating the reality of their death means taking it in with your whole being. The second is to process the pain of grief. So grief is experienced emotionally, cognitively, physically, and spiritually. People may be telling you it's time to get over it, move on, be strong. In contrast, one of the aims of grief support is to encourage the safe expression of all the natural grief reactions that we have. The third one is to adjust to a world without the deceased. So external adjustments include taking on responsibilities and learning new skills. Internal adjustments may look like you adapting to your new identity, and spiritual adjustments occur as you sort of grapple with questions about your belief system and the purpose and meaning of life. And the last one is to find an enduring connection with the deceased in the midst of embarking on a new life. So gradually you create a balance between remembering the person who died and living a full and meaningful life. So for the next one, we have developmental responses to grief in children. There is a myth that children are too young to grieve, that they aren't able to understand what happened or to really remember, but in fact, grief manifests itself developmentally in different ways in children. And so as you can see on this slide, there's sort of like different aspects of developmental responses to grief in children based off of age range. So from ages 2 to 4, we might see some generalized anxiety, behavior regressions, and whatnot. From the ages 5 to 8, we can see some concerns about safety and abandonment, and using play and talk to create, to sort of like recreate the event. From the ages from like 8 to 12, we see maybe some withdrawal from social situations or difficulty concentrating. And from the age range of 13 to 18, we might see an increased risk-taking behaviors or parentification. So maybe taking on the role of a parent, sort of like role changes in the family. For grief reactions in adults, grief affects everyone differently, like we said. So grief reactions may vary in time, intensity, and duration, and may impact all areas of a person's life. And so here are some sort of like common grief reactions in adults. We see some physical symptoms as like feeling weak or faint, increased blood pressure. For emotions, we have anger, sadness, depression, all the various emotions that, we kind of go through. For behavioral reactions, we might see some forgetfulness, some hyperactivity, maybe avoiding people or certain situations. For social reactions, we see some withdrawal from friends and activities, and maybe being overly sensitive to certain situations. For cognitive reactions, we might see some short-term memory loss, which can be kind of scary to experience, and maybe even some suicidal thoughts. For spiritual belief reactions, we can see some asking those sort of why questions and maybe a change in belief and values over time. So how to help someone when they're grieving. It can be kind of intimidating to try and find ways to help someone we know who is grieving. We often get caught up in trying to say and do the right thing. Our desire to try and fix things for someone can get in the way, when in reality, there is no fixing or curing someone of their grief. Oftentimes, the most helpful thing we can do is just sit in it with them. And so I think we have some time to just watch this short, I think it's like a 2-minute video, if it can be played. And this can kind of show us how to be the most helpful to others in their complex grieving process.
Let me know if y'all can't hear this.
So what do we do about all the pain we see in the world? All the pain we feel in our own lives? And why does it seem like our best efforts to help somebody feel better always backfire? I've been studying intense grief and loss, baby death, violent crimes, accidents, suicides, and natural disasters. And I've learned something really interesting. Cheering people up, telling them to be strong and persevere, helping them move on, it doesn't actually work. It's kind of a puzzle. It seems counterintuitive, but the way to help someone feel better is to let them be in pain. This is true for those giant losses and the ordinary everyday ones. Educator Parker Palmer writes, "The human soul doesn't want to be advised or fixed or saved. It simply wants to be witnessed exactly as it is." He's talking about acknowledgement here. Acknowledgement is this really amazing multi-tool. It makes things better even when they can't be made right. For example, somebody's struggling. Their baby died, or there's been a bad accident, or their mom got sick, and they're just sad. It's way more helpful to join them in their pain than it is to cheer them up. But here's what we tend to do instead. You have 2 other children, you need to find joy in them. Or, you know what you need? You just need to go out dancing and shake it off. Or, I felt really sad once. Did you try acupuncture? We're not really sure what to do with someone's pain, so we do what we've been taught. We look on the bright side. We try to make people feel better. We give them advice. It's not like this is nefarious. I mean, we try to cheer people up because we think that's our job. We're not supposed to let people stay sad. The problem is, you can't heal somebody's pain by trying to take it away from them. Now, acknowledgement does something different. When a giant hole opens up in someone's life, it's actually much more supportive to acknowledge that hole and let pain exist. It's actually a radical act to let things hurt. It goes against what we've been taught. In order to really support you, I have to acknowledge that things really are as bad as they feel to you. If I try to cheer you up, you end up defending yourself and your feelings. If I give you advice, you feel misunderstood instead of supported. And I don't get what I want either, because I wanted you to feel better. It's pretty rare that you could actually talk somebody out of their pain. Rarely does the admonishment to look on the bright side actually heal things for someone. It just makes them stop telling you about their pain. It's so tempting to try to make things better. When somebody shares something painful, it's much more helpful to say, "I'm sorry that's happening. Do you want to tell me about it?" To be able to say, "This hurts," without being talked out of it, that's what helps. Being heard helps. It seems too simple to be of use, but acknowledgement can be the best medicine we have. It makes things better, even when they can't be made right.
Thank you for sharing that, Becca. So yeah, that's just a little helpful video to sort of maybe visualize how to help someone who is grieving a little bit better. And for our final side, this is just a little helpful tool to help us have some ideas as to what to say instead whenever we are talking to someone who is grieving. So no matter how familiar you are with grief, it's still hard to know exactly what to say when a death occurs. It's human nature to fall back on the cliche and platitudes that we've grown up hearing. If you've ever found yourself relying on those automatic responses that you've heard, you're not alone. Most of the time, these sentiments really do come from good intentions and a desire to comfort. That said, this is just like a list sort of like some of those common platitudes and maybe some better options to say instead. So I'll just read one of them that I hear often, and it's let me know if there's anything I can do. So offering help in this way puts the responsibility on the grieving person to identify what they need and to reach out to ask. Instead, maybe make more specific, tangible offers of support. It's hard for pretty much everyone to accept help. So reassure them it's okay to turn down your offer and just keep checking in as that support tends to disappear after the first few weeks. So a better option can be, I'm on my way to the grocery store. Can I pick something up for you? You said, that your kids have juice boxes in their lunches. Can I grab a few packs? So just stuff like that can be maybe more tangible and helpful whenever you are helping someone who is grieving. And then I think that is it for our presentation. We have some additional resources on this page, and I think we can open it up for questions now if anybody has any.
We had a couple of questions pop up in the chat. One says, as a part of your support for families of divorce, is therapeutic supervised visitation a service you're considering? There's a need for this in Tulsa.
Yeah, great question. We have limited capacity in our counseling clinic. And unfortunately, like other mental health services, are a little bit on a wait list, so we're not able to provide the therapeutic visitation, but we also echo that sentiment. It is absolutely a need, especially with our families who are court involved or going through divorce where there's high conflict.
We also, thank you for that. We also have a question. Do you provide a year internship opportunity?
We do provide a year internship opportunity for concentration and foundation. We also take BSW students, and then LPCs, LMFTs. We have our counseling clinic has clinical intern opportunities.
Great, thank you. Oh, and I'm sure a lot of people would be interested to have the PowerPoint. So I don't know the best way to disseminate that if you're interested in doing that, but maybe you could, somebody could put their email in the chat for people to reach out.
Yeah, I'll put my email, and then Becca, do you want to post the PowerPoint on there so people can get those additional resources?
Yes, let me make sure I know how to.
I think,
Yeah.
let me see if I can figure out, because I think since it was made through like the OneDrive, the link may expire after a time. So let me download that PDF so I can give it to y'all to keep.
Okay, perfect. So Shelby will share it in the chat.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have any other questions? It's okay if not. Well, if there are no other questions, thank you so much for being here. We're so, grateful to have that information. That was super informative, and you guys really put a lot of information into that 45 minutes. That was, I feel like we're walking away with, news you can use, actual skills. So thank you so much for that. And
Thank you.
Yeah,
yeah,
thank
for
you.
sure. And so we have, I was just going to look at, do I remember what our next session is? There's been a lot of sessions. We have a session coming up at noon. And then we have one at 1 o'clock and another at 2 o'clock. And that